This is one of the most bizarre looking cars we've ever featured on this channel. It's from across the pond. I've never seen one in my entire life. And now I'm realizing you're probably having a hard time seeing the little guy behind one of our American beasts. So let me pull that out and then we can take a look at it. This tiny little thing is a 1953 Austin A30. Now Austin is a company with a long, rich, and storied history, based of course out of the United Kingdom. And this little British car really was maybe the grandfather? No, we'll go with father of the iconic Mini. So let's check out some of the crazy gadgets and gizmos behind this bizarre little blob. All right, my dude.
Hey, Tommy. There we go.
It's gonna get a little cozy.
Yeah?
So I think at this point...
Tight. Oh, you gotta really commit to closing that door.
You gotta really slam them.
There you go.
Yeah, it's pretty small in here. Yeah, you're right. If you take a trip back to post-war England, you gotta understand that folks needed small, affordable transportation. And there were a couple of really big automakers back in the UK, and something like 3,000 tiny ones, but two really big ones were Austin and Morris. Now, Morris had a model called the Miner, and Austin's response to the Miner was the A30. So the Austin A30 has door handles, just like pretty much any other car, and listen to the stunk it makes when you close the door. Ooh, sounds really good, but one thing that's missing is the door lock. Now this car is left-hand drive, but the door lock is only on the passenger side, the right hand of the car. I don't know if maybe this thing has been swapped around at some point, but regardless, there was only one way to unlock the car from the exterior, all in the name of cost savings. But that isn't my favorite case of cost savings. That's gonna be actually the window, because you open up the door and you go to roll down the window and you realize there's no crank. There's no, of course, power windows, but there's just nothing here whatsoever. Now, of course, in some old cars, the windows slide, but not in the Austin A30. There was actually this little kind of lever, which is currently missing, but that's okay, because to put down the window, you literally just slide it down into the door. And even better than that, it'll actually stay where you leave it, so you don't have to put it all the way down or all the way up. It's actually pretty well done in the way it works there. Now, of course, if your door is unlocked, anybody can come by and simply get into the car, but Austin thought about that. Now, the door handle is, once again, tiny and in a weird spot. It's this little lever which currently has a piece of plastic over it, but that's just how you unlock the door, and all it does is move a lever with another lever. But if you've got the car locked, check this out. I go to steal something from the inside, the window doesn't go down more than that. Now, of course, that's still a fairly big gap, but you couldn't steal something from the inside of an Austin if the door was locked. Very clever. Things are even weirder, of course, on the rear doors. Now, these cars, by the way, could be had in all sorts of different configurations. You got your little four-door saloon here, but there are also two-door versions and little cargo vans. Pretty cool stuff. Now, the rear door opens like normal. It's not a suicide door or anything, and actually the hinges are on the outside. But when you open up the door, you'll notice there isn't any way to roll down the windows, because the rear windows, they don't roll down. They're actually fixed in place. But don't fear, as rear seat passengers, you do get this little backwards hinged vent window, and that's how you get air into the back seats of an Austin A30. How did you end up with this thing?
Facebook.
Facebook. Love it.
Yeah, I know I just keep saying that, but all these weird little cars, you'd be surprised. If you keep an eye out, you can find stuff on there.
Should we put the windows down here?
Sure.
All right, that's down.
Go. There you go.
Wow.
Yeah, it's immediate.
So I think these cars originally had like an 803cc engine. I wonder if this thing has been upgraded at some point.
Yeah, I was told that this has the A35 engine in it.
Is there no synchro in first gear?
So
what's the trick?
The trick on this, so it's kind of like, you ever play that Operation game as a kid where
yes,
you would buzz if you didn't get it in just the right spot?
Yes.
That's kind of how the shifter is on this guy.
Gotcha. The front end of the A30 is dominated by this vertical grille, which is a little bit like an Edsel, but way more prominent. And then you have these fender-mounted mirrors, which look fantastic. Now, this car is a little bit of a hodgepodge of different parts and pieces, so I think it's got bits of A35 in the front, which honestly, to the layman, isn't all that different. But lots and lots of fun and just crazy stuff on this car. So let's talk about the hood. It's a front engine car with rear wheel drive, which is very unconventional by today's standards in a small, compact, affordable car. But to get to the hood, you actually do something pretty cool. So at the front, you've got this beautiful Austin A, and it's really elegant. And you actually lift up on the back of the A, and that is what unlatches the hood. So you go to open it, and then it doesn't open. Because what you have to do now is reach over, not to the front of the car for a hood latch, but to the side, and then push in, and this weird frying pan looking bonnet, as they would say, pops open, and then you got the little stick. And that kind of we'll just put that there for now. But yeah, that's how it works. And then to close it, we'll put the prop rod away. The first latch latches, and then the second one you lift up on the back of the A, push down on the hood, and now it's good to go. The engine in the Austin A30 is actually very, very significant. So one of the most iconic British engines of all time is the A-Series engine, the BMC A-Series, which powered, apart from other stuff, the Mini Cooper. I mean, every Mini from the late 50s all the way up to the model year 2000 had an A-Series engine. They sold millions and millions and millions of them, and this was one of the first applications of that engine. It had overhead valves. It was actually pretty sophisticated for the early 1950s. Now, in this unit, the top speed is said to be right around, well, based on reports of the day, like 67 to 70 miles an hour, and the Motor Magazine found a 0 to 50 time of just 29 seconds. Just 29 seconds. A horsepower rating, probably not a whole lot. And the other crazy thing about this car, right, is this is an old school way of building a car in general. So it is monocoque, which is, pretty good, but it's a longitudinal engine mated to a transmission behind that, which drives the rear wheels. And then the Mini came along in the late 50s after this car, swapped that A-Series to its side, made it front-wheel drive, cleared up all this interior space, and then, of course, every small car, basically since the late 50s, has copied that formula. But same engine as a Mini, which means parts are gettable, but, of course, a very different layout. The other thing pretty bizarre about this engine is you open the hood and you expect it to be right there, but you have to peer way down in there to actually see the engine. There's a good 8 inches between the bonnet and the top of the engine, kind of where the valve covers are. Now on modern day cars, you have to have actually a lot of space between the engine and the hood so that if you hit a pedestrian, there's some kind of cushion and buffer. Something tells me back in the 50s they weren't thinking in so many terms, but that's how it works. And everything is teeny weeny on this thing. The radiator is about the size of a piece of paper. This one does have the optional heater, which was an extra 9 pounds. By the way, the total price in this car, $507 when it launched in 51, which is equivalent to 15,000 pounds today, 15 grand. And wait till you see some of the features. Wait till you see some of the lack thereof of features that your 15,000 pounds equivalent got you. We're not going to bother with the seatbelts because if you get hit in this thing, it's game over regardless.
Yeah.
Man, that thing runs really well.
It does.
It's got a little bit of a meaty sound. You did the exhaust?
Yeah, just did a whole new exhaust all the way back. I guess they said the only muffler that would fit in this thing is a cherry bomb muffler. So it gives it kind of an interesting sound for sure.
All right. First of all, why is this thing 2 feet wide? This is the narrowest car I think I've ever driven.
Yeah, even narrower than your Mini?
It's close to it. Does that brakes?
Yeah, they're not power brakes, so you really gotta...
Now, I read online that these A30s had hydraulic front brakes and mechanical rear brakes, like via linkage. Oh yeah, you really gotta stomp on them.
Yep.
All right. Let's make sure we have a wide berth. 0 to 50 in 29 seconds is what we're dealing with.
There we go.
Speedometer works.
Yeah. Well, it's for the most part.
Second? Oh, second was good. I wonder if there's no synchro on first. There might not be a... I may have to double clutch first. All right. In the third. Sorry, I didn't mean to touch your leg. Dude, it actually drives pretty well.
Yeah.
It's loud.
It's loud. It's a pretty smooth little car, though. I mean,
steering's really light. So you got this enormous wheel, which is sawing at your family jewels, but it's very light steering.
Yeah. Right. I mean, even a guy like me, I could fit in there and drive it.
Brace yourself. We got railroad tracks. Any trains? Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a smooth little car. I mean, it doesn't really have much sporting intentions by any means, but I
can think of few cars less that I'd like to get hit with a train in than an Austin A30. Now, I actually own a Classic Mini, which is the car which came after this, obviously, right? And the Mini has always been praised for its interior room relative to the exterior size. It was 10 feet long, 4 feet wide, 4 feet tall. And that's true, but I am 6'1", and I don't really fit in Classic Minis all that well. My head does touch the ceiling, generally, unless there's been some wizardry to the seat brackets, whatever. In this Austin A30, I actually have plenty of headroom, which is really interesting. Now, leg room is a little bit compromised, even with the seat back, but it's kind of surprisingly roomy for what it is. Part of the advantage of having that bulbous, weird-looking roof is that you do have pretty good headroom, so even at 6'1", I'm pretty comfortable. And actually, I shouldn't be complaining. Legroom is very adequate as well. I would probably rather take this on a long road trip at 50 miles an hour than my Classic Mini, because it's just a little bit more roomy. Now, width, right, it's not a super wide vehicle, but you do get these adorable little bucket seats and an enormous steering wheel. This steering wheel is huge. Obviously no power steering, but it's got 13-inch wheels on it. The steering wheel is like a 19-inch wheel. This is a donk of a steering wheel, even though the standard wheels are like the size of a pie dish. But that's not the coolest part of the interior. We got lots of cool stuff in here. So the dash on the Austin has some cool features. First of all, dual glove boxes. You got one in front of the passenger and even one in front of the driver, which is quite nice. And then the center mounted gauge. This is one thing that Minis were iconic for, but even on the Austin, it's going to be found here as well. And the advantage of this is you can have left-hand drive and right-hand drive versions and not change around the instrumentation. But it's this beautiful polished unit. You've got your speed in miles per hour, a Smith's gauge, fuel, low oil pressure, and then no charge warning lights. But really, really fine piece of quality there. And then you got all these little buttons strewn about. So you've got a key for your, a slot for your key, and then this right here is actually going to be your starter button. We've got some wiper controls over here, and then of course your choke, but that's pretty much it. This one does not have the optional radio, which I think was 34 pounds back in the day, but of course, it's an old car, so you gotta have the ashtray. Now, a couple other things worth noting. The gear stick comes out and then toward me and then up again, and it looks really cool and it's kind of fun to use, but it's just a 4-speed conventional pattern, first, second, third, fourth, and then reverse all the way to the right and down. I mean, what do you want me to say? It's like driving an old clock. I mean, it's really a cool experience. It's got a solid rear axle, independent front suspension. The ride is super soft. Yeah. But you're right, this is not a car you want to go sporting in. So like a Classic Mini, you're like, oh, let's go dart around the turns. This is like, if I dart around the turns, I'm going to be on my side. Yeah. But the engine's got some pep to it. Sure. Okay, well. What is that, like 35 horsepower, 40 horsepower? Not pep by modern standards, but I've driven a lot of old cars like our 2CV, which is way slower than this. Yeah. All right, let's see how the turning radius. I bet it's pretty damn good. All right, ready? So once you get it out of first, I think first has probably got no synchros, is my bet. So it's probably going to be, let's see if I double clutch first, and then if I clutch. Yeah, that's much better, yeah. There you go. Transmission feels good though. Full throttle in the second, that's 10. In a third, that is 17. It's quite a comfortable little car. Now, I've got a lot of headroom. I don't have a lot of visibility though, because you kind of look into the cowl. Yeah. See, I'm only 5'9", and for me the visibility is perfect. But I can see if you're, maybe 5'11" or taller, you're kind of having to turn your head a little bit to be able to see out the windshield properly. The thing which I'm really impressed with is, I mean, this is a seriously drivable car, even though it's the size of a toaster. Yeah. And looks like something the Minions would drive. I mean, it is a very surprisingly usable car. Yeah. All right, left turn. Now, what's the most you've had it up to in terms of speed? 52. How was it at 52? You get a lot of shaking and rattling, and it's an experience for sure. You don't it might go a little bit faster, but I don't want to go a little bit faster. So they had two models during this time period. All right, one came after this a little bit, but there's the A30 and the A35. Now the A30s can be identified because they have these little guys. That right there is called a trafficator or a semi-4. I think that's right, depending on who you ask. But these were the old school turn signals. So you click a button on the dash, that would pop up, and that is your turn signal. Now this one has been converted to more standard blinky style, but this was a very cool little little remnant of time gone by. They would live on the side, and then you wouldn't need a front and a rear one because they would stick out and glow at night, and that's how people would know whether you're turning left or right. Let's check out the rear seat in the Austin A30. Now, it is a surprisingly luxurious, almost looks like a sofa, but it's a bench seat. Pretty decent room considering the size of the car. Now, I do think this is quite a bit bigger dimensionally than a Mini. It's just longer, right? A lot longer. But even still, this is a much better back seat. Now, of course, you do kind of look into the sheet metal here, and then the fender well intrudes heavily into the side of the vehicle. But, I mean, a hell of a comfortable rear seat for a tiny car from the 1950s. So let's open up the trunk, the bubble butt of the Austin A30 that hinges open like that. And, you know, it's a trunk. It's not much to see back here, except for some of the coolest things which Brendan has, like the Austin Cars manuals. These are all ancient British manuals. We've got the full workshop manual for an A30 and A35. And what I love about these is they just break down everything about the car. They've got entire breakdowns on the braking systems and the engine rebuild requirements. And then this one's even cooler. This is an Austin A30 parts list. Just a fantastic piece of history, and I'm so glad that this kind of stayed with the car over the years. But I mean, look at that. There's the full breakdown of the A-Series engine. Super cool to see. That guy's got a faster engine, guaranteed. Yeah, it probably rattled a little bit at the higher speeds. Yeah. But the crazy thing is, you drove it here from a town which is like an hour and 15 away.
I did, yeah.
Any reliability issues?
No. It didn't overheat on me once. It never smoked on me. I mean, at least since getting this exhaust done on it. And I mean, it maintained that 50, 52 miles an hour the whole way here. I just had to wave people around me every now and then, but I made it.
This is a fun car to drive. It really is. You know, you got those awesome little mirrors poking out over the fenders. You got this wonderful little zippy engine. You got brakes you got to plan for about half a mile in advance, but I mean, really, it's pretty fun. I really enjoy driving this on the weekends.
It's an experience, and the thing that surprised me most about this is the looks that you get. I mean, for how cheap of a car this is, this gives you more looks than some of the more modern Ferraris and whatnot, believe it or not, driving around. Everybody wants to know what it is because no one knows what it is.
The horns on this car may have been added after the fact, but this has an insanely loud horn on the world's smallest car. It's actually an air horn, so to turn the horn on, or I should say to blow the horn, you turn on a little pump. Are you ready? Yep, that is like a train. Absolutely crazy. I love that so much. Now, of course, a huge thank you to Brendan, who's just the man when it comes to these insanely cool old classics. I was very, very fortunate to be able to drive this little guy, probably the only time in my entire life, but overall, like, it's way cooler than I would ever expect a car of this vintage, and drives better than anything I'd expect a car of this vintage to. These old British cars, yeah, they're a little weird, and yeah, they do look like grandfather clocks, but they do show a surprising amount of engineering. There's a lot of competence in these things back in the early 1950s. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. As always, check out TFL, alltfl.com for all the latest and greatest in new and very used car reviews.